Welcome, welcome, welcome. And like I'll say it again, welcome to the Remember One podcast. I am your host, J.U. Colcrick. Today we're joined by our Stanford grad turned Michigan State sports law professor, as I like to call her, our legal analyst, Deb Snyder.
And hey, J.U.
Hi, Deb. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. And as always, keeping us on track and making us look good is our producer, Ray, doing all the hard work behind the scenes. First off, real excited for the show today. It's going to be a really good one. I think it's going to touch home to a lot of people, be it if you are an athlete, if you're a parent of an athlete, or if you're just in your everyday life, and especially with the last 2 years that we've had with COVID and everything, we're going to be really hitting on the mental health aspect of things. We have a very exciting guest, Dr. Tim White from White House Athletics is going to join us, and I'm really excited about it. But before we get into that, before we talk about that, Deb, let's pay some bills. The Remember One podcast, as always, is powered by Taguava Coffee. Taguava Coffee, great coffee company, great group of guys. The really cool thing about Taguava Coffee, it's sourced right from the farm to your cup. Everything is tracked, and what's even better about it, 3% of every order that's placed, they purchase a water filter device that goes back to the community. Deb, you got your coffee last week. How have you liked it so far?
It's great. I know I'm supposed to say that, but I'm actually saying that for real. It's good. I enjoy it, and I love the do good aspect of the company.
Yes,
water is the biggest resource that we need, and the water filtration, that makes all the difference in a community.
Yes, definitely does. So if you want to get your hands on some Taguava coffee, make sure you go to taguava.com and use the promo code RememberWhen at checkout, and you're going to get 10% off your order. But wait, there's more. Just like everything, you have to worry about, shipping charges and everything like that. With Taguava coffee, all the shipping is covered. So go to taguava.com, use the promo code RememberWhen at checkout to get 10% off your order. All right, now that we paid the bills, Deb, let's jump into the show.
I'm ready.
All right, so I got a year for you. 1981. That's 41 years ago. Do you remember what you were doing in 81? Actually,
I do. Do you?
I was just a twinkle in my daddy's eye. Yes, I was not born yet, but so I had to use the internet for this.
I had to get that out there. I was actually at Stanford. I was at Stanford.
Yeah, there you go. See, the Stanford Cardinal you are.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're the nerds.
Oh yeah, I've got that for you. There you go.
There it is.
Rolling up my little fear of the nerds. I got that especially for you, J.U.
That's awesome. So one of the reasons I did choose 1981, because today our guest is a sports psychologist, Dr. Tim White, owner of White House Athletics. And we're going to have a deep conversation and now talk about mental health aspects and everything in sports specifically, but also with the way that, COVID's impacted everyone, 2020, everything that's happening. We're going to take a look at entertainers, athletes, parents, kids, everything like that. But something really, 41 years ago, was pretty much like the first time we had like a professional athlete kind of have a meltdown live on TV. And so the first meltdown in sports when John McEnroe uttered what became the most immortal phrase in tennis when he screamed, "You cannot be serious," arguing the line call. I don't know if we have a little clip of that, producer Ray. If we do, I can throw that on. But if we don't, no biggie. We can just talk about it. Do you remember that, Deb?
Actually, I do. Stanford guy. I've got to mention that we're going full on Stanford today.
Mm-hmm.
And here we're showing the clip here. I don't know if we have sound.
He hits a great serve.
Oh, look at that outfit. You got the headband going. You got the short shorts.
Yeah. So, so that's really, one of the first like live meltdown. As a professional athlete, you're taught to keep your cool, keep your composure and everything like that. And obviously he did not do that, in this match here. So, and that's just, showing a little chink in the armor of, an athlete on the court or on the field or wherever, their profession in the pool, because they're supposed to be the best of what they are and can't be phased for anything like that. So this is like, it was really interesting. This is like the beginning of really what happens every day now.
Right. And we see athletes misbehaving now, but that wasn't something that you saw normally on television. It wasn't a normal thing. And it was tennis. I mean, tennis was the most genteel of all sports.
Especially at Wimbledon, too.
Yes. Yes. Everybody's wearing their white, all white. And to have this happen at Wimbledon was a big deal. I mean, it made all the headlines.
Right. But, so we're going to take a deeper dive into that, but like some fun facts. All right. I know last week we started this tradition of each year that we're in. We're going to go, snake back and forth. You're going to tell 5 fun facts about 1981. I'm going to tell 5 fun facts about 1981. I actually had to dig deep in the internet to find these fun facts. So I will let you go first.
Okay. Well, I'm going to stick with our Stanford theme. And I'm going to go with, in 1981, we had the first woman appointed to the U.S. Supreme Court. You knew I was going to do that, didn't you?
I knew it.
My favorite justice, Sandra Day O'Connor, appointed by Ronald Reagan. First woman.
See, you stole. I knew I should have picked 6, but you stole my. That was the one that I had. That's why I told you to go first, because I knew how excited you were for this fact.
You introduced me as we've got 3 for 3 on the Stanford right now.
Exactly. You're on a roll. All right. So I'll go. My fun fact in 1981, it's a royal wedding. Prince Charles and Lady Diana were married.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And actually, this is awful, but last episode was 1997, which was the year that Princess Di died.
Yeah.
And that was so not to bring it down, but yeah. Okay. So you've got a royal wedding, which I watched, by the way. Okay. I'm going to go, let's go economics here. We're all concerned about inflation, the price of gas, mortgage rates are going up. 1981, inflation was 10.32%. Much higher than it is now. A 30-year mortgage. This is going to shock everybody. The average 30-year mortgage rate was, do you want to try a guess on this one?
No.
16.6%.
Wow.
16.6%. The minimum wage was $3.35.
Are you belting out all yours? Because you're stealing.
No. No, I'm sorry. I was just going economics.
Well, while we're in economics,
I'll let you go. I'll let you go.
While we're sticking with the economics theme, all right, the price of a new car in 1981 was $8,910 for a brand new car.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, you got me.
All right. So you're up. I've said two. You said two.
I said more than two, but we'll
Okay.
count it as two.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go with a stamp was 18 cents.
Correct. Another one of mine that you stole again.
Sorry.
All right.
Never let me go first.
The song by Journey, "Don't Stop Believin'," which is played at many, many sports events, when a team's down, and it's a rally cry. That song was released in 1981.
Wow. Would you like to know what else was released in 1981?
Don't say "Let's Get Physical" by Olivia Newton-John.
No, I'm going to say Beyonce.
Yeah.
Serena Williams.
Yes.
And Serena Williams.
Sasha Fierce was born in 1981.
Ooh.
Oh man, I think we got off track with that. We've said our facts here. Minimum wage was $3.35. Could you imagine living off that with the price of inflation? And
oh my gosh. And your mortgage is 16%?
Right. That is unbelievable. But
okay. I've got one more for you though.
Okay.
Okay. And I've got to get this in. 1981 was the first year that the NCAA actually had any women's championships.
Wow.
It was field hockey and cross country in November of that year. That was before women even played basketball for the NCAA.
Look at that.
It was a little sporty, so.
Yeah, hey, I'm all good with it. You know what I wanted to do today, because once we announced that the guest, our speaker was coming on today, we got lots of great feedback from people, and I don't want to take too much time, of us, chatting back and forth here. I want to jump into that and bring the guest in and just go from there. And if you're listening on Facebook Live, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot them in, and Dr. White will be more than happy to answer them if he can. We can expand on any topics that we're talking about. I'm really excited about this topic because when I played, a sports psychologist was not something that was like readily available. I remember it was my first year in college. We didn't really have that. It was my first year in the NFL. It was like really cutting edge stuff at the time when I was with the New York Jets. That's when I started meeting with a sports psychologist. And after that, it was a great first experience, and just continue to meet with him, twice a week. As an athlete, every athlete wants to find what they call flow. Where you're in that flow state of mind during the game, where everything around you is blurry. You pretty much have tunnel vision, but you're just, everything is in slow motion. We'll get more into that with Dr. White about what exactly flow is. But our guest today is he is also the counselor and sports performance psychologist at Vanderbilt, Harvard of the South. Great school in a beautiful city, Nashville. And also he's the owner of White House Athletics. And an even better fact about Dr. White is his wife is a Spartan.
I knew you were going there.
When I was in college, she actually worked at the football facility. Yep. Great girl. True Spartan. So we gotta like him because he's a Spartan. He married a Spartan, and he's by blood, he's with us. Dr. White, really appreciate you coming on and joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah. So, hey, let's jump right into things. I want to know a little bit about your path. I know you studied, athletic training, strength and conditioning. That's a different aspect of the physical side of sports and everything like that. You're training your body. So what made you transform from the athletic training and the strength and conditioning to the mental aspects of sports?
Yeah, this could be a very long story very quickly, so I'll try and give you the cliff notes. Really where all of this really started for me was, as a young kid, I would watch college football or, pro basketball or whatever the case may be. And I would see these competitions where say a team's up 21-3 at halftime, and the other team comes back and wins. And that was so fascinating to me, of this idea of you're down by 18 points at halftime and you manage to come back and win. And of course, on the flip side, how are you up by 18 points and lose? And so that fascination just always kind of stuck with me. And then within my own athletic experience, I was a swimmer and a runner in high school, and I certainly had very high expectations for myself. I put a lot of pressure on myself, which most athletes do. And in some ways, my mental state really hindered my performance and really got in the way. And I was fortunate to have certain aspects of my own athletic career where my mind actually worked to my benefit. Unfortunately, the majority of the time, it probably got in the way more than it helped me. But then when I went off to college and I was studying athletic training and the strength and conditioning realm of things, that's when I first learned that sports psychology was really a thing. And so when you think about remember when, and for me, this was the early 2000s, to even know that sports psychology was an actual career and was something that somebody could actually help you with the mental side of your game and your performance. And so as I got that initial exposure, I decided to pursue, I knew I would do a master's level degree at some point. And then so I decided that's what I would study for my master's degree. And so after a year, funny, you talk about the Jets Connect, or the New York Jets. I did an internship with them for a year. So there's another fun connection for us. After that initial internship, I did go back and get my master's in sports psychology. And during that program of study, I actually started to take some of the skills and concepts like mental imagery and relaxation and using them with the athletes who were going through lengthy rehabs. So as an example, one of the first people I started testing some of these ideas with was an athlete who had knee surgery. And she was very gracious and very open to exploring and experimenting. And we found anecdotal benefit to it. And so I took that into the athletic training portion of my career. And over about, a 10, 12-year period, I continued to use those skills and strategies with people as they went through the recovery process. I ultimately got to a point where I said, I want to do this full time. And I certainly wanted to stay in the college environment if I could. And so I knew that in order to pursue those jobs, the field had evolved enough that I was going to need a clinical degree to go along with my sports psych degree, which was more performance oriented. And so the clinical degree was something that set me up to get licensed as a psychologist and be able to really address the full spectrum of sports psychology and mental health, from elite high-end performance all the way down to traditional mental health and diagnoses and concerns that plague everybody. Athletes absolutely face these same challenges just like anybody else. So that's right. A little bit of a long, windy road, but that's my path.
Yeah, exactly. Like you hit on when you were saying, in 2000 you thought about it, and you mentioned also, how can a team be up 18 and lose? We just saw it a couple weeks ago with North Carolina in a national championship game. They were up 16 and they ended up losing that game. It's all that mental aspect of things. It's all momentum, crowd, how you're phased by it and everything like that. And then you're going back to, 2000 when you first got into it. Do you feel, because I personally feel there was and maybe still is a stigma on meeting with a sports psychologist. Like, you hear the word psychologist, you're like, oh my God, something's wrong with me, and when it's really, no, you're just trying to improve yourself and, have a healthier balance, but people don't realize that. So how do you attack that? And what would you say to somebody who, maybe having issues with that, there's a stigma on it and they're kind of ashamed to, seek out that help?
Yeah, the stigma is absolutely real. It definitely exists. Fortunately, we're breaking it down. One of the ways that we're doing that, especially in the sports realm, is helping people understand that this is comparable to strength and conditioning for the body. We're going to do strength and conditioning for the mind. We're going to teach you skills and concepts and strategies that you can use in those moments that equate to mental strength and mental flexibility and adaptability. And so it is literally training your brain and your mind the same way you would train your body. That's the analogy I use the most. And a lot of people, when they hear that, it makes sense, it registers, and they're like, oh, okay, yeah, I think, yeah, let's try some stuff out. And, as I dive into specifics about, I like to use the activity and putting my clients into scenarios and situations where they're feeling some of those same, racing heartbeats, and maybe their breath is a little bit shallow, or they're feeling a little bit tense in their muscles. And as I create those situations for them, I'm also teaching them how to work with that and how to manage it and be able to still execute the skills that they're trying to do, even though they might be feeling a little bit nervous, a little bit scared, worried, or whatever the case may be. I'm literally training them for what they're going to go through on the field, on the court.
Right. That is very interesting, and that's something that we have to get past. That we have to kick down those doors, break those ceilings about that stigma about getting help to be better at your craft and everything like that. People, if you're not, this is something that I don't understand. If you're not good at math, you get a tutor. If you're not, if you're feeling some type of way, and this is your profession, being a football player, basketball player. If you're not strong enough, you go and you meet with the strength coach. If you're not running the right routes, you meet with your position coach. So if you're not feeling the mental side of things, there should be no shame of saying, hey, I want to put in that extra work to make myself better. That's something that we have to break down, and definitely, break that stigma. Deb, what do you think about that? Jump in here.
Well, I have a lot of thoughts on it. I think that there's a huge stigma anytime you go see a psychologist. There's the mental illness stigma that we have not broken down. We have not. I mean, it's something that Prince Harry, Prince William have talked about a lot. We're getting better at it. One of the things that I just wonder. I mean, there are a lot of things I wonder, but people just seem to be misbehaving these days, and it's everywhere. It's on the airlines. It's John, McEnroe times a trillion these days. It seems like it's gotten worse and worse and worse. Is that something that you're seeing athletes are different? I mean, you've been working with athletes for a while. Are you seeing a difference, or, and it could be COVID, it could be, the rate of inflation.
Right.
Had to throw that
rate of inflation is having an effect on everybody.
Right.
It is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll go ahead and jump in. I think it's another element of, athletes are at first and foremost, they're human beings, right?
Right.
And so they encounter the same stressors that you and J.U. and myself, we all encounter on a day-to-day basis. And to be honest, they encounter certain stressors that we don't. And in some ways, the stress of a student athlete is absolutely very different than the stress of a traditional student or, even a professional athlete. And, when you and I go to work every single day, it's not broadcast on TV for the entire country to see. And then when we make a mistake, it's not written about in the newspaper and talked about on the radio the next morning and so on. And so part of the challenge that they certainly face is this added scrutiny and added attention. And the thing is that as things like TV contracts have gotten bigger and bigger, and there's more exposure, there's more opportunity to see successes and failures. And of course, we tend to tune in on the failures more than we do the successes. So that element of pressure is definitely, I think it's fair to say, greater than it used to be. The other thing that I think comes with this element of added pressure and challenge is our ability to tolerate mistakes, our ability to tolerate the discomfort that comes with disappointment, that comes with anxiety, that comes with worry. It's one thing to consider what is my interpretation of this situation and how threatening is this scenario. It's another thing to consider how prepared am I to actually handle it. So to give you a little bit of an analogy that I've been using more and more lately is think about, am I burning a small candle on my desk here? or do I got a campfire up in my office? And if I'm encountering a situation that the literal kind of threat to my sense of self and my sense of safety is really only that candle, but in my mind it's a campfire in my indoor office, then my alarm bells are going off much louder than they probably should be. So that's the interpretation piece. The how do I handle it and how do I tolerate that situation or that scenario is, okay, do I have a fire extinguisher and do I know how to use it? And if I do have that fire extinguisher and I do know how to use it, I do have those mental skills to cope and manage with the situation, then I can put out the fire. But if I haven't developed those coping skills, I'm running out of the house and more than likely calling a fire department for what is subjectively a candle on your desk. So there's a lot of nuance to mental health, and it absolutely applies in the sports world for sure.
Right. That, that's a great analogy, and that's really good. Before we move, there's a question that came in, and I want to, like I said, the goal of this, is to, if someone's reaching out and asking these questions, I want to get as many of these in as possible, because it's their needs, as opposed to what Deb and I, want to hear you say. Sure. So this is coming in. They said, are there any resources for student athletes that are battling mental health issues as it pertains to their sport? My child is a perfectionist, something that has made her good at her sport, but also led her down a dark path. For now, she has completely given up the sport she loves because she hasn't been able to find the middle ground between her driven side and her mental health. She receives the therapy she needs, but supporting her in relation to her sport, I've found nothing. I see so much of Harry Miller and Kate Myers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so resources, this is where something like a sports psychologist does come into play. And this is where we get into some of the differences between traditional mental health and traditional psychology versus sports psychology. As someone in this space, it's very important that I need to understand the ins and outs of sports and the nature and the pressure and the expectations. There certainly are all kinds of very skilled and successful mental health practitioners out there. However, if they are running into a bit of a barrier or a limitation with regard to how well they understand the sport environment in that context, that can limit how effective they are with the client. And so, as a little bit of a suggestion to this specific situation, absolutely continue to address the mental health aspect of things. However, there may be a need and a benefit to looking into, is there someone that's more of a sports psychologist versus a traditional counselor or psychologist who can navigate that sporting context more thoroughly? And that absolutely is not to diminish the work that this person's already receiving. But if we're talking about kind of maximizing the benefit, it sounds like there's a need for a little bit more of a specialization.
Okay, so with that, for that specialization, what kind of, what would you suggest or recommend, people, like what kind of specialization would you suggest or recommend?
Yeah, so as a resource where someone can go and look for sports psychologists and try and find people that have that training and specialty, the Association for Applied Sports Psychology is our professional organization for this space. And on their website, it's again, Association for Applied Sports Psychology.org. They have a section of their website where you can search for trained clinicians who are trained and certified in sports psychology. It's fairly common for a lot of us to work with people remotely. So if you do run into a bit of a challenge in terms of whether or not my person is local, that is an option that comes up. I work with a lot of people remotely, and of course that's become much more common with COVID over the last couple of years. But that's where I would direct somebody with this type of question is go to the Association for Applied Sports Psychology website and look for someone who is certified in sports psychology.
Okay. Excellent.
I think that's a really good point. There's a bit of a difference between treating somebody who's not an athlete and somebody who is an athlete, because some of the pressures are different.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm curious about, and this is from my daughter, from things that I've seen. A lot of athletes, when they face an injury, how it could be a career-ending injury. It could be, and especially there, it happens a lot in college athletics
Mm-hmm.
for a variety of reasons. But how do you work with athletes who are facing that injury, or perhaps that career injury, and then losing their, I would think, losing their identity to a large extent?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you're right on with that element of identity. So to answer the first part of your question, do I work with those people? Yes, and that's actually a bit of a specialty or a niche for me, especially given that I have the sports medicine background. I understand some of the elements of injury and surgery and those long-term rehabs in a way, in a unique manner, just given my professional training and experience. So if someone wants to address that aspect of their concerns, I would be more than happy to be a resource for them and take on clients if that's appropriate. Is that something that challenges people psychologically? 100%. And to your point, the element of somebody's identity can be a big part of that, because when you are no longer able to play your sport, that sense of, I'm an athlete, I am a basketball player, volleyball player, swimmer, gymnastics athlete, whatever the case may be. And when that's taken away from you, and I've lost that piece of my identity, the person effectively goes through a grief process. And on top of all of the pain and the lengthy rehab process, and how daunting that can be for some individuals. So that absolutely is a space that I would encourage people facing those types of situations to get connected to a sports psychologist for sure.
And that is a great segue into, because the really crazy thing is, when we announced, we advertised that you were coming on, we had lots of I had lots of great feedback. I reached out to you and it's like, hey man, this is, giving lots of feedback. And something that really came up is, because I have a group chat with a bunch of former players, especially from college.
Mm-hmm.
And something that's coming up right now is, and Deb, alluded to it, and you alluded to it, with the identity part of things. So I consider playing a sport. All right. This is just my opinion, and Deb knows I'm the opinion guy. I'm not the
She's the professor.
She's the
You're
legal
the opinion.
analyst. She's the professor.
I have opinions too.
She's the Stanford grad. I'm just
come on.
Spartan, even though Michigan State did beat Stanford in the Rose Bowl. But
Yes,
we're not gonna go there.
yes.
But we're having these conversations, and so I compare leaving the sport, not due to injury, not anything. And full disclosure, I have never, and nor do I want to, I've never or want to go to prison. But I kind of like consider, once you're out of the sport, like you're done serving a 10-year bid in prison. Because as an athlete, you're told what time you wake up, what time you eat breakfast, what time you lift weights, what time you have meetings, what time you eat lunch. Everything is structured for you.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't know any different. And then when at the end of it, you're thrown into the world. So, and I think that's where a lot of my former teammates, and I think that's where a lot of people in college and the NFL struggle with. I don't care what profession what sport you play, basketball, everything like that. How do you separate from being J.U. Colquitt, the football player, to J.U. Colquitt, the person, J.U. Colquitt, the man, the husband, the father? How do you separate that when you're not going into every club that you can, free of charge, getting free meals and everything?
Follow the line.
Wait, I have to stand in line? I have to pay for my meal? So, like, how do you do that? How do you make that transition?
Absolutely. One of the first things I always share with athletes in that type of situation that you're describing is football is something that you do as opposed to who you are as a person. And we're getting into this element of identity, and ultimately that encompasses the element of self-worth and your value as a human being. And so one of the things that I have found particularly useful with athletes struggling with this loss of identity and uncertainty about what do I do now is to dive into the elements of, tell me about the characteristics and the qualities of you as a human being. And so someone might tell me, I'm funny, I'm kind, I'm someone who's inclusive and likes to build relationships with other people. And it starts to get them to think about these elements of their character, which is much more central to who they are as a human being than what they did as an athlete and what types of performance they were engaged in. So it's really starting down that path to helping them explore their sense of who they are independent of what they do. And then, of course, there's a lot to be said about identifying new ways to channel that same type of energy and effort into other activities. Not hobbies is probably not a fair term to be using right now, but new interests and new hobbies. You see a lot of athletes that are able to take some of their financial security and, okay, let's get into some business as an example. And
Right.
how can I pour my energy into something like a restaurant or a bookstore or whatever it is that they may be interested in.
Okay.
Right.
I have a question that was text to me by someone that's watching. I am an athlete from a small town.
Mm-hmm.
I was what they would say big fish in a small pond. Now I'm playing a sport at a collegiate level where others are similar to better talent level as me. How do I cope with that, and how do I psych myself up to go back to the same mentality I had in high school?
Yeah. And that's a very common and very real experience that a lot of people have, especially coming from the small town. One of the things I'm seeing more and more is that athletes are getting to that college level of competition, and there's this sense of like, okay, I've made it. And they haven't identified that new challenge or that new next step. And so that's something that I would encourage the person asking the question to start thinking about, okay, what is my new challenge? What is that next goal or that next step that I'm trying to strive for, whether it's playing time, being a starter on their particular team, or if there is an opportunity to play professionally, is that realistic, and is that something they can really pursue? And as they redefine their goals and their aspirations, that will help spark some of that motivation and that internal drive.
Excellent. All right, so let's take it a little bit back to this past summer. One of the biggest things, we had the Summer Olympic Games,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the biggest topics out of the Olympics was the whole Simone Biles thing.
Yes.
She had what they called the twisties, and she withdrew from some competitions. And on one hand, you had people saying, good for her. She understands herself and everything. And then on the other hand, you had people saying that was very selfish of her. Someone else could have taken that spot. So
Yeah.
can you walk me through like the whole process with, the twisties? What is that exactly?
Yeah. So I will be transparent here. I do not know the twisties inside and out. However, what I have seen and read and heard about what the twisties is, it is comparable to what a lot of people in the world of golf and baseball and softball know as the yips. In that, in yips, for those that are unfamiliar with this term or this concept, is this sudden inability to perform a very basic skill. So in baseball, it's the pitcher who can't throw to first base without it bouncing on the ground. In golf, it's the guy who has a putt that's only 3 feet away from the hole, and he pushes it 6 feet past the hole.
Greg Norman in the Masters.
Yes. Yeah. It's that sudden stutter, that sudden glitch in his movement. And so getting back to this specific situation with Simone Biles and this element of the twisties, where it's described as an experience in which she doesn't know where she is in the air. So that's a really important thing for people to understand, is that as a gymnast, or let's say a diver, another sport that is very similar, as they're flipping and twisting, as fast as they're moving, they are looking for specific spots in the arena or in the pool or on the floor that helps them know how many rotations they have made and how many flips they've completed, so that they can move their body and prepare to land. And when you don't know where you are in the air, you don't know whether or not it's time to prepare for the landing or not. And so from a health and safety standpoint, that was one of the main arguments that came up over the summer, and it makes a lot of sense. If she isn't able to execute that skill because she doesn't know where she is in space and she's setting herself up for injury, that's a pretty big risk for her to take. And there are people that certainly would argue, well, it's the Olympics and do it for your team, do it for your country, and so on. I have a hard time with that, to be honest. Like you're talking about, potential catastrophic injury in a sport where injury is very, very common.
Right, exactly.
And we're talking catastrophic injury. We're not just, it's not just a sprained ankle. We loved Kerry Strug in '96, but that was a completely different situation.
Right.
And so, what do you do with it? How do you handle it? Was it quote unquote the right decision? I think it was the right decision to step away. Is she taking a spot away from somebody? No, because you can't predict when that happens. If you knew that you were going to run into the twisties, you wouldn't even enter the competition. And that's why she pulled out. So it's unfortunate that it happened, and it's a very unfortunate timing.
I have a question for that. So the Olympics, because 5 years prior, she had great success. One of the most decorated gymnasts in the world, not just the country, in the world.
Yes.
And then COVID hit. It hit a lot of people mentally, physically, the training, everything like that. And the Olympics was pushed back a year.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that played some role in the mental aspect of her training, when they got to the Olympics, they were in a bubble. You couldn't fraternize and everything like you're used to as an athlete. You're a creature of habit, and you couldn't do what you usually do. You're in a bubble. You go to practice, you leave practice, and you're back in your bubble. Do you think that year, due to COVID and everything, impacted her mental side of things to cause those?
Yeah. So you're putting me in a hot spot here. Like, you're asking me to speculate, right?
Yeah. And see, that's what I said. I'm the speculator.
That's okay. It's
I'll give you
privilege, and we'll just put a caveat. This is pure speculation.
Yes. Give me an asterisk, and
yes.
But I'll give you, from a very much an outsider's perspective, one thing that I think is very honest and fair to say about the experience with COVID is that our baseline level of stress has gone up. And our baseline level of anxiety, our baseline level of worry, and our baseline level of fear is higher than it was in 2019. And so for someone like Simone Biles or any of those Olympic level athletes who not only had a very real disruption to their training plans, but you're also dealing with an increased level of anxiety, increased level of worry as a human being. And that is one of the contributing factors to something like the yips, or in this case, the twisties. It is a very challenging and difficult subject to study, but some of the research that has been conducted has identified that there is an anxiety component to this. Whether that anxiety is present prior to the event or a result of the event isn't entirely clear, but we know that there is an element of anxiety here. And so if your baseline level of anxiety is already higher than it was, and now you add in the context of being at the Olympics, and you add in the context of the fact that your training was disrupted, and now you don't know where you are in space, and you are facing a very real possibility of severe and possible catastrophic injury. Like, yeah, there's a mental component there. Is it mental health versus mental performance? Yeah, you know, that's where it gets a little bit more dicey. But at the end of the day, you know, anxiety is present, and it does influence that experience.
Yeah. And you know, I totally, you know, I agree with that. You know, like you said, when your training is disrupted, everything that you work, you're on a schedule, you're on a regimen, this, and this, and then there's like, oh no, hold off, we got to go another year with this, and you can't train, you know, like you do. You got to be secluded from everyone and everything like that. I definitely think that takes a toll on your mentals. Also, too, I want to also talk about the tennis player Naomi
Osaka.
Yeah.
Yes. So she had some mental, you know, health issues, and you know, things were affecting her mentally, and she withdrew from a couple tournaments, you know, due to the fact that, you know, I think, and once again, my opinion, I think when she's on the court, that's her safe place. That's her safe place.
Yes.
But once she's in the media room for the interviews, that's where it becomes like, oh, you know, it's the uncertainty. You don't know what they're going to ask you and everything like that. But people say, and she got a lot of flack for withdrawing from tournaments due to mental issues, but yet she did pose for the cover of Vogue, or there was some magazine and stuff like that. And my response to that is, because she was in control of the narrative of that. She knew the question that was going to be asked and everything. And when she's in an interview, she didn't know what was going to be asked. When she's on the court, she knows because she trains for it. Is that something that you see?
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point in terms of, you know, how prepared am I for what I'm about to face? Do I know what the interview questions are ahead of time, or do I know what I'm stepping into? Versus a interview at a tournament that is likely broadcast live in some capacity.
Right.
And so you don't have the opportunity to press the pause button and really take some time to think about what you want to say, and you don't have the questions ahead of time and things of that nature. So uncertainty, it comes into the picture here. And again, this of course is some degree of speculation. But when you have that element of uncertainty that we are assuming was present, that is a space that can make people very uncomfortable. And that discomfort can really be inhibiting to your ability to do that particular task. And it's a challenge, you know, because in a lot of ways we see her as like, her job is to be a tennis player. But what is often misunderstood and not fully realized is that as a professional athlete, her interactions with the media is part of her profession. You know, you were a professional football player. You had various media obligations, and most of the general public doesn't fully understand that. And so when this is part of her profession and her professional responsibilities, if her anxiety is inhibiting or limiting her ability to do that, you know, in a lot of ways, I think it was the right decision to step away. And I make the comparison to, say, a student who's at school who's struggling with their mental health. And if their mental health is in a position that limits their ability to perform as a student, then they absolutely should step away and take a leave, address their mental health, and then resume when they are better prepared to handle that environment. Right. It's the same situation. It's just a different context.
One of the things, if I could just ask a quick question here, I'm going to throw this out there. You worked at University of Michigan.
I did.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry. I had to throw that
scrolled over that.
But you worked there for 5 years.
I did.
So, and, you know, so you were working with athletes back then. Now you're working with athletes. I'm always curious as to the role of social media. It seems to me that since you worked, in 2011 when you were working there to 2022, social media has gotten significantly more endemic. It's gotten meaner. It's,
Mhm.
and it's just people see everything. So you're talking about being on television, but you don't even have to be on television.
Right.
You just have to have someone with a cell phone, and pretty much everybody does at this
Right.
point. There,
Mhm.
how is that affecting the athletes? I'm sure a lot of our students are pretty nervous about it.
Yeah, it ends up being something that can really go both ways. When you think
Hmm.
about college athletes, Stafford, Michigan State, Vanderbilt, wherever they are, in some ways it can be an awesome tool to gain exposure, and especially in the new era with name, image, and likeness,
Oh boy.
and the ability to kind of build a brand and establish relationships with professional companies and literally get paid. It absolutely can work to their advantage. And it comes with some pretty big risks and pretty big dangers. There are a lot of privacy laws that aren't fully understood. And do I have permission to share somebody else's video? Do I have permission to take a video of another person and post it? That is a very slippery and dangerous slope that most people don't really understand. And then you get into, I'm picking up on a little bit of that element of how people can be incredibly mean and bullying, online bullying, and so on. It really puts us in a position to spend time as coaches and leaders within the sport community exploring how are we establishing our team culture? How are we establishing a sense of respect amongst teammates, amongst opponents? And how are we teaching our younger athletes, our younger generations, how to use these resources in a responsible manner? It's just, I got a lawnmower and I got 2 young kids, and, I'm going to teach my children, keep your hand away from the actual portion that's cutting the grass. If you want to help, you keep your hands up on the handle. That's me teaching my children how to use a tool responsibly. Social media, I think, could be very similar.
Yeah, I one of the things that really concerns me about social media is the fact that I always say it's easier to edit. So in other words, it's easier to poke at somebody.
Mhm.
And a lot of it seems to me from so-called fans.
Mhm.
I'm scared. I'm not an athlete, and I'm scared to put something out on social media.
Yes. Yes.
I can't imagine being an athlete who's dealing with name, image, likeness, or a professional athlete who's trying to tweet, congratulations
Mhm.
to somebody.
Yeah. There's all kinds of judgment out there, and people are going to label you one way or another based on what you say. And certainly there is a degree of conscientiousness with what you post. And it also contributes to what is that experience with stress, with pressure, with judgment from others. And ultimately kind of circling back to that element of how are we preparing our young people for these types of situations. It really gets into that element of identity and who are you as a human being, not who are you as the athlete, who are you as a human being. And that's a piece that doesn't get a whole lot of attention, in my opinion.
Well, that's true. I'll razz you a little bit about you being at U of M. But I have to say,
Sorry, Doc.
Yeah.
my cousin's wife went to U of M, and I think she broke the mold. She's one of the sweetest girls that I know, the
Okay.
nicest person, and so she's one of however many that go to U of M fans. But I think she's a fair weather fan. If they beat us, then she'll be texting. But if they lose, she'll be like, "Oh, was there a game today?"
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
Okay.
I'm not gonna call her out, but yeah, my cousin's wife, she knows who she is. She's watching right now. But so let's jump into something different. I know you focus more on the sports side of things, But I just think overall, like since 2020, like it's just been a whirlwind, of things. It's like lemony spigots, expect the unexpected, the
Mhm,
series of
mhm.
unfortunate events. So let's just go into the business world. How does someone keep and gain the confidence if they want to start a new business, and like, hey, I want to have a electrical company. I want to go out there and market myself. I do great work. How do you gain the confidence of going out there and market yourself and not be worried about the rejection side of things?
Mhm. Um, Acceptance becomes a really big element here in that you are going to get rejected. You can't prevent it. You can't eliminate rejection. You can't eliminate the fear of rejection. And so our ability to recognize, yes, that's going to be a part of this process and I can handle it. So it goes back to that candle versus a fire analogy that I was using earlier. And so to get in a little bit more of the kind of actual steps or process here, I absolutely am not a business professor, so don't quote me here, and it's not gospel by any means. But in terms of your mindset, start with what is the goal or the end product that you're striving for. What is that business that you're looking for, and then identify what we call performance measures or performance standards. So if I want a electrical business that does $20,000 a month in business, what are the performance measures that are going to get me to that $20,000 a month? That's X number of sales, X number of projects, X number of leads every single month. Those are things that you can measure and track. And then you take each of those performance measures or performance standards and break them down into individual steps. So if I'm going to get X number of leads every single month, then I'm going to find X number of email addresses, and I'm going to email all of those individuals. I'm going to go to X number of conferences or business shows. And as you identify those smaller steps that get you to those performance measures, that's where you put your time and your energy and your effort. Again, this is from a mental standpoint. As you focus on those process steps, that's where A, you have more control, and B, it's easier to execute those process steps. And then the last thing I would say is that as you combine each one of those steps, that's what leads to reaching those performance measures, which ultimately leads to that outcome. When your attention is way up here on the final outcome, you're effectively distracted. And when your attention is on the step that's right in front of you, then you can fully execute your energy, your time, your effort in a efficient and productive way.
Yep. Definitely. I definitely agree with that. Deb, do you have any?
I just, thank you for the therapy session.
I'll send you a bill later.
Oh, thanks.
Put it on my tab.
Yeah, but to all of our listeners, I mean, I'm sure that a lot of people aren't professional athletes or student athletes. It could be your child, your cousin, your aunt, your uncle, whatever. I think everything you've said though is applicable to real world and real people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you lose a job, you have the same sense of loss and grief as if you lose your athletic ability for whatever reason. You could be cut from a team. Right. You could just be old, like at the age of 25 or something. Isn't that when everybody retires? Except for Tom Brady. Right. But any of this. So it seems that everything you're saying is really applicable to all of our listeners.
Yes, absolutely. And
I'm going to jump in real quick. I have a question that came in. I know we're going to wrap up here soon. But a question that came in is, what about an athlete who becomes physically aggressive towards their spouse and others? Does this have to do with how they are taught to reach their goals no matter what?
Yeah, that's
I think that's a great question.
Yeah, no, it is absolutely a great question. I'm a little hesitant to make that link. I think a slightly different explanation that is similar and may relate to the scenario being presented is that sport is often a outlet for people, especially sports that involve contact like football and hockey and wrestling, and where we hear certainly plenty of stories of individuals where that's where I was able to get my aggression out. That's where I was able to let my anger out. But even sports that aren't contact oriented sports, it's often a big release for athletes, and ultimately it's that release of energy, and it's an opportunity to process both physically and mentally the stress and tension that they're dealing with in everyday life. And so what is potentially occurring for someone who may be aggressive towards a spouse, especially after they retire, is they've lost that outlet to expose and express that energy. And so subconsciously they're not, they don't know what to do with it. They don't know that this process is even occurring most of the time. And now they have this energy and this tension and this stress that they previously had a very built-in method of working through, and now it's gone and they don't know what to do with it. So it's kind of like the pot that boils over, and now that aggression is directed towards the people around them versus the teammates or opponents during a 2-hour practice.
So my question to you would be, how would you suggest they handle this aggression other than being the physical violence and everything like that?
Yes, this is where certainly finding new modes of activity comes into play. I mentioned for me as an athlete, I was a high school swimmer. Nowadays I'm certainly not competing, and of course those weren't aggressive, physically oriented sports. But I engage in triathlon events, and I train. So I technically still have that opportunity to do that type of sport. But perhaps a football player maybe gets into weightlifting, as an example, and having a new form of physical activity where they can still exert that energy certainly has value. But this also kind of circles back to the larger conversation around mental health and working with a clinician where I can learn to recognize the stress that I'm experiencing, or when that level of stress is starting to go up, and I can learn how to process and work through that stress or that anxiety or that worry or that anger, whatever it is that's coming up, and find the healthy coping skills so that it doesn't turn into physical aggression towards someone that is, a loved one, someone that's close to you. Deb, there's always the question of CTE. That is a very, that's a subject that has, of course, gained a lot of attention in recent years. My personal belief is that we don't understand CTE nearly as well as we think we do. And I would say the same thing for concussion too. Concussion has got a ton of research recently, and that's great. But I think there are too many people who think we have it figured out, and we don't. And so we are learning more, and we are doing much better than we were 10 or 15 years ago. But we need to be careful that we don't assume we have it all figured out.
And I got another text with a question. So we have about 3 minutes left before we wrap it up. And because like I said, I want to get these questions in. So this text came to me. I was a good athlete in high school, college, and the pro level. My kid is not as athletic as I was, but they're going out. How do I refrain myself as a parent from lashing out on him and making him have fun with his sport, and keeping the expectations down?
Yeah. It starts with that element of expectations, but it also jumps into the space of how does my child's performance affect my sense of kind of security or like skill as a parent. If I'm a good sports parent, then my child's a good athlete, and that's just not necessarily the case. And so we need to be, as adults and as parents, we need to be conscious of how much of this is my own identity, and separating my identity from my child's identity, separating my identity from sport, and being able to have that sense of who I am as a person, independent of my own sport, and in this case, my child's sport.
All right, perfect. And a couple of last quick questions before we wrap up. What service can you provide for high school athletes and collegiate athletes?
So I do a lot of one-on-one work with athletes where I'm teaching them mental skills and strategies. I do team consultations as well, where I'm in front of entire teams. I'm building out some specific like workshops and group type programs, starting with that injury space. So there's a range of opportunities and things that I can offer to someone who's looking for help with this mental health or mental performance. Really what I do with a lot of people is, let's get on the phone, let's have a brief consultation. I offer that consultation for free, and that gives us a chance to get a sense of what are they looking for, what do they need, and how can I help them, and is it a good fit? And so I see the website popping up here. That is my website. There's plenty of opportunity to see the process that we go through there. And in a lot of ways, that's what we're trying to do, is be as adaptable and flexible as we can, so that we can meet the need of the athlete. And it starts with that free consultation.
So producer Ray beat me to the punch. My next question was to you. If I'm a team, if I'm a coach of a team, high school, youth, collegiate, NFL, pro, whatever, how can I reach you? Is it specifically through the WhiteHouseAthletics.com?
That's very easy. I'll even, throw an email address out there for everybody, and my phone number. The email address is tim.white@whitehouseathletics.com. Phone number, there's a couple options that are on the website. So if you use that there, I saw producer Ray, highlighting it on the website. So again, email tim.white@whitehouseathletics.com, or just go to whitehouseathletics.com. And there's obviously a contact us page there, as well as, again, the email address and the phone number. So 3 very easy options to get in touch with us. And like I said, we'll figure out what exactly you're looking for and how can we best support you.
Awesome. Hey, Dr. White, I really appreciate you jumping on here.
Yeah.
This is something that's near and dear to me. I don't think it gets enough exposure. I think it's something that needs to be put out there, get the exposure it deserves. And, telling the listeners, viewers, whoever that this may reach, it's okay to seek out help, no matter if it's for sports psychology, if it's for mental health, if it's for anything that's going to help you improve on being a better you. I think that's something that's really great, and something that should have a spotlight shined upon it. Not a lot of people talk about it enough, and that's something that we should do. But I really appreciate you joining us and coming on. I would love to have you come back on again. I know Deb for sure will probably want you on her podcast, Sports Slob.
Oh yeah, Sports Slob.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah,
let's do it.
More in-depth detail there. For the listeners, the viewers, thank you again for joining in with us on this Thursday night. This show is powered by Taguava Coffee. Go to taguava.com. Use promo code RememberWhen for 10% off your order. Guys, appreciate it. For Deb, producer Ray, we love you. We appreciate you guys. And from me, J.U., the host of the Remember When, peace out.